Hi, good evening. I'm Lonnie Stonich, the Executive Director of FAN. We're a nonprofit that presents programming exploring human development across the lifespan. I'm honored to welcome you to a great conversation tonight between Sal Khan and Professor Angela Duckworth. Thanks for joining us. FAN's YouTube channel has an archive of over 300 videos of past events, so be sure to subscribe to the channel to get updates when new recordings are posted. And now for introductions. Angela Duckworth, yay, Angela, is the Rosa Lee and Egbert Chang Professor at the University of Pennsylvania, the faculty co-director of the Penn Wharton Behavior Change for Good initiative, and founding faculty co-director of Wharton People Analytics. Angela is also the co-host of the wildly popular podcast, No Stupid Questions, and her first book, Grit, The Power of Passion and Perseverance, is an international bestseller. FAN hosted Angela in 2012 and 2016, and we are thankful and blessed for her engagement with our organization. Salman Khan is the founder and CEO of Khan Academy, a nonprofit with the mission of providing a free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. He is also the founder of Schoolhouse.World, Khan Lab School, and Khan World School, all nonprofits focused on making personalized mastery education accessible. His new book, Brave New Words, How AI Will Revolutionize Education and Why That's a Good Thing, is an exploration of how artificial intelligence and GPT technology, I got it right up there, GPT technology will transform learning and offers a roadmap for teachers, parents, and students to navigate this exciting and sometimes intimidating new world. And now let's welcome Sal Khan and Angela Duckworth.
Yay, raucous applause. Hi, Sal. How are you?
I'm doing well. Good to see you, Angela.
It's very good to see you. So many people want to ask questions, but I get to be the MC, so I'll be the interlocutor. I'll be channeling the curiosity of just a whole lot. I would have to say that this is not only one of the most well-attended fan talks, but there's a particularly high proportion, and it's not everyone, but a particularly high proportion of educators of various stripes. So fan draws parents and others, but you won't be surprised, I think, when I volley at you some of the questions. I think we should begin, though, with the basics. I mean, why don't you open, Sal, with whatever kind of like level setting remarks that you want to make. And I will just say, it's a great book. And thank you for writing such short chapters. I thought they were appropriately sized for attention spans in the 21st century.
I try to do things that I myself can consume. But just as a little bit of background for folks, I think a lot of folks know Khan Academy. We're a not-for-profit, mission-free, world-class education for anyone, anywhere. And, for now, almost 15, 20 years, I've been at this effort. And I've always told the story how Khan Academy got started. And I think it's more relevant now than ever. So, you rewind almost exactly 20 years ago. My original background was in technology. And then I found myself after business school as an analyst at a hedge fund. Although it's interesting,
I forgot that part. You were at a hedge fund.
I was a hedge fund analyst. Although I just a classmate from undergrad, they unearthed some time capsule that we wrote in 1997. And apparently in mine, I wrote in the time capsule that I wanted to start a school, so that I would have started a school.
What?
I forgot that I was thinking about it in 1997, even when and apparently several of my classmates said that I was going to start a school. So
wow,
there was something, I must have been talking about it even in the late 90s. But
yeah.
back to the story, back to the official story. In 2004, I was a year out of business school. I was an analyst at a hedge fund. I had just gotten married. I was based in Boston. My family from New Orleans, where I was born and raised, had come up to the Northeast to spend time for the wedding. Came out of conversation, my 12-year-old cousin Nadia was having trouble in math. I offered to tutor her remotely. When she goes back to New Orleans, she agrees. Slowly but surely, she got caught up with her class. She was having trouble with math. She got caught up with her class, a little ahead of her class. Word spreads in my family, free tutoring is going on.
By the way, just to date things, just to give it that vintage, Skype? Was that
Not even... I mean, we were using Instant Messenger, Yahoo Doodle.
Whoa.
I mean, I would literally get on the phone with her, and then we would write. Yahoo Doodle had a little scratch pad that two people could write on it.
Wow.
It was probably like 200 pixels by 200. It was very, very basic. But that's how I tutored her. Word spreads in my family, free tutoring is going on. I find myself tutoring 10, 15 cousins every day after work. And I saw a common pattern with them. The reason they were struggling wasn't because they didn't have great teachers. It wasn't because they weren't working hard. It was because they had gaps. Either the gaps were because they never learned something well in the first place. So they're in an algebra class and they're a little bit shaky on their decimals or their exponents, or they learned it at one point and they forgot it. We all know about summer slide and, kids, that's why we do spiraled review and things like that. So that's what I was spending a lot of my time filling in those gaps. Background in software, I thought it would be fun to write some tools to help me scale my tutoring. So I started writing an exercise generator for them. I started making tools for me as their tutor to keep track. So people don't realize the first Khan Academy had nothing to do with videos. And actually the teacher tools, the primitive version of it was almost one of the first things we built, or I built at the time. But I called it Khan Academy. The domain name was available. It was a family project. And then in 2006, a friend suggested that I make videos to supplement. I put them on YouTube. That took on a life of its own. And then it was in 2009, I quit my day job. 2010, and 2008, I set it up as a nonprofit. 2009, quit day job. 2010, we got our first funding. And if you think about that journey all the way from then till now, now Khan Academy is 160 million something registered users, et cetera, the whole journey, and in multiple languages and almost every country. But that whole journey has really been, and now it's much more than just me, how do we try to scale up the types of things that I was able to do with Nadia and my other cousins, that level of personalization, that level of mastery learning. How can we, if a teacher is in a class of 25, 30, 35 students, they know that those kids are at different levels. They all have different needs, unfinished learning everyone talks about now. How do you really address that when you know that you also have to move lockstep through a curricula? So that's what we've been working on ever since then. And then, and I think we never thought, if this was the ideal, we never thought we could get all the way there, but maybe we could go like this. And maybe if technology advances, maybe we go a little higher. But when we saw what was possible, OpenAI, and I opened the book. Well, it's not the very beginning of the book. I opened the book with a story with my daughter, but shortly after, I talk about how we fell into like the real generative AI world. OpenAI reaches out to us and says, they wanted to show us what would eventually become GPT-4. This was summer of...
This is before the world. I think you had the inside track.
Yeah, we did. This was summer of 2022. ChatGPT doesn't come out until the last day of November 2022. So this was almost 5-6 months. And what Sam Altman and Greg Brockman, the leaders of OpenAI, showed me and Khan Academy at the time, and we were the first people to see this technology outside of OpenAI.
Is that right? You were the very first. I knew you were on the inside track. You were the inside track.
I'm pretty sure we were in fact, I think they gave me and our chief learning officer access before most of OpenAI, most of their team.
Most of their team had access.
It was like super top secret stuff. But when we saw, and we'll talk more about AI, it's not perfect. And there's a lot of edge cases and there's a lot of things to worry about. But it did seem like it had the potential to emulate what a great tutor or teaching assistant could do. We said, hey, we gotta really double down on that. And then, and then ChatGPT comes out, which wasn't even built on GPT-4. It was built on an older model. And then the whole world exploded. People started getting afraid of cheating, et cetera, et cetera. And then we launched what became Khanmigo in March of 2023. So a little over a year ago. It feels like a lifetime ago.
Okay. And why don't you tell us a little bit about Khanmigo, but you can choose to go right to that. Or I think a lot of people who are with us in this conversation actually know what a large language model is, and they kind of know at least as much as anybody knows, right? Because I don't think anybody, and I mean that, including Sam Altman or anyone else, like fully understands how the heck these, next generation AI models do what they do. But, the basics are, I think, not all known by everyone. So feel free to level set there. And then I really would love you to tell us more about Khanmigo, which of course I know a little bit about, but even I don't know everything that's going on.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I don't want to keep plugging the book, but I guess that's why we're here.
I think we're here to plug your book. I'm going to plug your book.
But
you can keep talking.
No, I was going to say, I go
around.
into a little bit more detail in the book, but one of the whole points of the book is to let anyone understand the basics of what at least the underlying technology is before we talk about how it's going to affect education and work and college admissions and all of that type of thing. But one way to think about it, and I start, well, I talk about this in the book as early as 60 or 70 years ago, as soon as computing became a thing, science fiction authors and technologists have said, well, what if we can make computers do things that we would normally associate with human intelligence? And there was immediately two schools of thought. One was people essentially to write traditional computer programs that like, if this, do that, if this, do that. Um, some of the original and actually even the existing, chess playing, checkers playing algorithms, et cetera, do that kind of thing. If you're in that type of a situation, do that. They're a little more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. There was another school of thought that says, well, that's not how intelligence works in reality. Uh, let's look at the human brain. The human brain, you have 100 billion neurons, and these are all connected to each other with synapses. These synapses have different strengths depending on how the organism the experiences reality. Some connections between neurons grow, others shrink. Maybe we should simulate that in a computer, and maybe that's how you get at intelligence. And people have called that artificial neural nets, but they're really trying to simulate neurons and synapses. I remember when I was an undergrad in computer science, I talk about this at the end of the book. I started actually thinking I was going to be an AI researcher and being fascinated, especially by the latter scenario. But the reality is there were simple neural nets at the time, but we did not have the computation power when I was in college in the 90s.
Just like the
So
raw horsepower, just
the
like
raw
the
horsepower.
hardware. Yeah.
I mean, think about when people say a model, like you can have a weather model, like we maybe are more familiar with weather models, right? When the forecaster is predicting where that hurricane's going to go, what they're doing is you have these supercomputers that are just imagining they're chunking up our atmosphere into little cubes. And then they're saying, okay, if this chunk of atmosphere is at this pressure and this temperature and the wind speed is this, how will it affect the other chunks of atmosphere? And then it runs that through a huge supercomputer, and then they're able to make predictions about what the atmosphere, what it might look like, in an hour or in a day or something like that. So when we're talking about large language models, or especially neural nets, let me say, before I go into large language models, you're essentially trying to model a brain, neurons and synapses. So when people talk about parameters, they're really just talking about synapses, the number of synapses and how strong those things are. But we didn't have, back in the 90s, we didn't have the raw computing horsepower, and we also didn't have the training. Now, what happened since then is the internet happened, and all of a sudden you have all of this information that's just on the internet, consumable by computers, and obviously computation has gotten a lot better. And then obviously there's been a lot of advances in the field of AI about how do you build these neural nets, how do you train them, et cetera, et cetera. But the kind of mind-blowing thing is this last generation, and with GPT-4 especially, things have really started to get to an
Taken
interesting
off.
place
Yeah.
where they're training on huge amounts of data, more data than any human being could consume in 1,000 lifetimes type of data. The models themselves, if you think about them in terms of neurons and synapses, they're still simpler than the human brain, but they're getting close. They're about a 1/100th the complexity of the human brain, which is getting close. But they have so much more data, and they're trying to specialize around this language. But all they're doing in many cases is predicting the next word,
Right.
which
Like
everyone else's brain.
CAT, right? Like
Exactly.
that's effectively what it's like.
Exactly.
THE. I mean, you could
Exactly.
say THR and then right. But that is, I think sometimes when people have no idea what AI is, that what you just said, Sal, is so helpful, right? It's trying to predict the next thing based on its experience, right? So like how many times have I seen THW? How many times have I seen THE? So anyway, I think that's very helpful.
Especially at a word level. And there's a little bit of discussion in the book about this because some people like to be dismissive of large language models, like, oh, all it's doing is predicting the next word. And then I say, well, what am I doing right now? I'm kind of subconsciously just talking. Maybe this will be disappointing for folks. Like my conscious mind's just watching, seeing what Sal is about to say. Really, my 100 billion neurons, in fact, probably not all of them, probably the parts that are more connected with the language and, some of the concepts we're talking about, they're triggering, my inner observer is just saying like, okay, what's the next word? I'm not consciously planning every word that's coming out of my mouth. It's just coming out. And so I personally think there actually are very strong analogs between these models and what our brains actually do. I think we'll learn a lot about how we think based on
Yes.
these things.
People keep asking, like, are these computers smart? And I keep asking, like, are we?
Exactly, exactly.
wait, what does this all mean? Okay, that is incredibly helpful. And the large language model you sort of hinted at, or maybe you just said, which is, now there's everything that's out on the internet. So it effectively you can train these models with all of the sentences and paragraphs and passages and books that are out there. Do you want to transition to Conmigo? Because I feel like this conversation you had with Sam Altman at OpenAI and his team, where you did have not only an inside track, maybe the inside track, really gave you a jump start on applying generative AI to education. So take us wherever you like, but I absolutely want to make sure that includes Conmigo.
Yeah, I remember still that first weekend, it was end of summer of 2022. They gave us access. And I remember even asking them, like, hey, can this speak other languages? And they said, we don't think so. And then I tried it my mother tongue. I was born here, and I don't speak Bengali that well, but my family speaks Bengali. So I tried to speak it with Bengali, and it spoke back to me in Bengali. And I took a screenshot, sent it to Greg, and he's like, oh yeah, we just tried it out when you asked. It does speak essentially every language to various degrees but it's not like it got trained on a ton of Bengali content, which is, once again, tells you a lot about how languages are related. Anyway, that's a whole other interesting thing. But I remember that weekend, and I couldn't tell anyone about this. It was the hardest secret for me to keep. I was like not sleeping, trying out things. I remember I tried out, well, I mean, I write about it in the book. I got it. I got it to rewrite the Declaration of Independence in the tone of Donald Trump. And I'm like, okay, this is mind blowing because it did it well. It's like, regardless of what you think of that, it did a good job. If Donald Trump were to write the Declaration of Independence, it nailed
That's
it.
what it would sound like.
It will be a great country, the best anyway. But but then I said, well, I was obviously very curious about things relevant to Khan Academy. Could it potentially write content? It said I did find it. I mean, it could create, say, exercise content, but it had errors, reasonably frequently. I was like, okay, so maybe it could be used as a bit of a productivity tool for our content team, but it's not going to replace our content team. Then I said, I started prompting it, and our chief learning officer, hold on, my dog is barking.
Really? Like literally?
Polly.
I thought he meant metaphorically, but apparently he meant real. And I will remind everyone that the Q&A is open. So some of you pre-registered your questions, and some of you are chatting them in the Q&A, and I'm monitoring magically both. Okay, so go on. Yes.
Sorry, I know y'all couldn't hear. My dog she was losing it because she.
I thought you were speaking in a very deep metaphor, but like your actual dog was barking.
Yeah,
Okay,
no,
got it.
actual,
Okay, good.
But anyway, but what we started seeing, it could actually interact as a tutor, very similar to the way that I used to text message with Nadia. And so the more our team learned about it, we're like, hey, this is really cool. This could get us that much closer to that ideal of personalized learning. We also realized it could help with things like writing lesson plans and progress reports, and potentially things like at least a preliminary pass on grading and things like that. And like, this could be an amazing teaching assistant. But then there was issues. There was math errors. There was hallucinations, which is when an AI makes up stuff.
Because it's predicting the next thing, and it predicts something, but it's not actually that, right? I mean, I think that's one way for the
although they've
layperson to
gotten
understand
dramatically
hallucination.
better. I mean, it's
so
amazing.
much better. In the last couple of months, it's gotten just
exactly.
Yeah.
And it's kind of amazing how good they are, like that they don't hallucinate more, given what they are, given what they're doing. I mean, now actually it's almost hard to make some of the most modern models, the ones we're using as well. Even, you can say, hey, tell me the mass of the sun to 9 decimal places, and it's correct. So it's not, anyway, that's a whole other conversation. But there were other things that we worried about. It was obvious to us, and this is before ChatGPT came out, this could be a cheating tool. If you're going to use this with students, how do you make sure that the conversations stay appropriate? How is there oversight? How do you make sure kids don't do anything dangerous with it? How do you protect their data, their privacy, et cetera, et cetera? So we started having all of those debates inside of our organization. And I talk a lot about this term educated bravery in the book. We said, look, this isn't a reason to run away all of these risks, but we have to make safeguards around that, because otherwise the education system is not going to be able to benefit from this very powerful technology. And so we put the safeguard, what eventually became Conmigo. It won't cheat. but it will Socratically nudge you along. It will, teachers, parents, and district administrators have transparency over what students are doing. They can even talk to the AI and ask for summaries. Hey, what have my kids been up to? What are some common themes? So that's there. Students also know that, which is so sobering. If a student does something particularly inappropriate, the AI actively notifies the district administrators and the teachers. So once again, it's acting as a bit of a teaching assistant, in that way. But then, it's on the use cases, and we're adding new use cases every day. We said, hey, this could, while you're working on a Khan Academy exercise, it can support you, not do the problem for you, but ask leading questions, the way that I would when I was working with Nadia, or the way that I still do with my kids now. If you have if you're watching a video and you say, why do I need to learn this? It knows what the video is about, and it can say, well, what do you care about? And it can do that. And maybe it'll remember that. It actually does remember that now. In the book, I start with this experiment that I was running with my daughter in December of 2022, where I didn't want it to write a story for her, but I wanted it to write a story with her. And so she was writing a story with the AI, and at some point she wanted to talk to one of the characters in her book, or in her story, and she was able to. And I'm like, oh my God, I was thinking too narrow about what's possible with this AI. You can literally, so we have activities where students can talk to AI simulations of literary characters and historic characters. And there's a lot in that too. We can discuss more.
Right, like you could give ChatGPT 4 or the equivalent the Donald Trump written, Declaration of Independence or Constitution, and then ask Thomas Jefferson what he thinks of that revision, right? Like you could do that. Like you could do that right now, and it would take
Exactly.
2 seconds.
Exactly. And so we have, already in real classrooms, people doing that kind of thing. I don't know if they're doing the exact thing, but so we put all this together, and I remember when ChatGPT came out, I slacked Greg Brockman and Sam. I was like, what have y'all done? You have us all lawyered up with this non-disclosure agreement. You just launched something. They said, we didn't launch that. They said, we didn't launch anything. We just put a chat interface on top of an older model, and the whole world exploded. We didn't expect that. And I was bummed because immediately, okay, this was not built for education. There was no guardrails on it. It was actually an inferior model, so it actually made
Right.
way more mistakes. It was really bad at math. And for good reason, school districts started banning it. Because
You're taking me back in time. It's not that long ago,
no,
but right,
it's like a year and a half ago.
inadvertent, yeah, and right, then people tried it once and they were like, oh, it made this stupid math mistake. It's dumb.
Right.
Yeah, that did
And
happen.
so
I forgot.
I was like, what's going on? But the good news is when we launched Conmigo in March of 2023, the system had kind of come full circle. They're like, hey, the underlying technology is interesting. We just wish someone would launch it in a way that it was higher quality.
Right, with guardrails, designed
doesn't
for
cheat.
kids. Yeah.
Yes, designed for kids, data privacy, loops educators in the right way. And, as bonus, really a ton of teacher tools to really help. And, I don't want to foreshadow it too much. There's going to be a very exciting announcement tomorrow about teacher tools.
Exciting amounts. And actually, can you tell me, because I've lost track. I mean, we've collaborated, and I think your team just sent us the data on our little tiny part of Conmigo that's teaching kids how to manage frustration and also how to get distractions out of their room so that they can do their Khan Academy lessons more effectively. But I have lost track of what the current, how many people are using Conmigo and where is access at this point? I think I stopped paying attention when you were piloting in large districts like Newark.
Yeah, and this is a moving target. Every week it changes for the better, for the most part, the answer here. When we launched with a few thousand teachers and students in some districts that were close to Newark, New Jersey in particular, Hobart, Indiana, that already had high fidelity use of Khan Academy. And I think you're going to hear some more news from these districts in the not too far future about some exciting results, actually even before the AI. But we ourselves didn't know how big or how fast this was going to get. Then by fall of 2023, there's a strong interest. And so we almost had to push people back. Like, hey, we can only handle so many people in this first year in this pilot. We ended up with several tens of thousands teachers and students in some of the districts that we work most closely with. And, we have this whole thing called a district Khan for districts, where we do support and training with the district and drawstring and district dashboards. And, but as we're now going into this next school year, it looks like it's going to be hundreds of thousands, if not approaching 1 million students and teachers, for the most part, public schools system, using Conmigo both as a teaching assistant for teachers and a tutor and other things for students. Now, one of the interesting things that you touch on, and I touch on in the book, is cost. Khan Academy has never been free to build. Our mission is free world-class education, but you can imagine we have now almost 300 employees. Our budget is around 70 or $80 million a year. We have historically funded that with philanthropy, and then including our server costs and things like that. And then we're able to give it free. And obviously, when people want support and all of that, and everything we just try to do as accessible as possible, because that's our mission as a nonprofit. But the computation costs for these frontier models, for these most advanced models, is significant. When we launched, the reason why we didn't think this was going to be for all of Khan Academy, we said, hey, we just have to get our feet wet here, is we thought it was going to cost $10 to $20 a month of computation cost in order to support a student or in order to support a teacher. The good news is that like what we see oftentimes in technology, the technology is getting cheaper fast. We've gotten more efficient at using it. And we have also, and this is part of the announcement you will hear tomorrow, we find philanthropic partners who want to help us spread to the world. So the simple answer is, I'm really foreshadowing it. You're going to hear for US teachers tomorrow, we have figured out a way to give these state-of-the-art tools for free to US teachers. And this is something that,
well, you just gave us the announcement. I love that we forced it out of you, but nobody say anything.
You forced it out of me.
This is
My
the cone
arm
of
is
silence.
twisted. Yes.
That is actually huge, because that's I think there's no parallel. Like there's nobody else has said, like, look, we're going to make a generative AI powered education tool free for anyone in this country.
And it's important, really, because there's a lot of folks kind of saying, oh, I got an AI tool, this, that. This is using, and there's some models, AI models that are like previous generation that people can put stuff and say, hey, here's an AI tool for a teacher. They aren't good. In fact, I would say they're irresponsible to use. It's kind of like, but this is state of the art. This is the actual computation costs are actually on the order of many, it's real money that is being used to subsidize US teachers. And hopefully then we can expand beyond the US shortly thereafter. But we're trying to make it all as accessible as possible. We're trying to bring down the cost per student. Right now, it's probably in that $15, $20 per year range in the computation costs. But I hope that when we're talking a year from now, it's for sure sub $10 or even sub $5 per student per year. And we're trying to work with districts and local philanthropy so that we can work it all together so that we can get it out to as many kids who need it as possible.
So we have really provocative questions, and I want to go to those now that you have like level set and caught us up to speed, and also given us the foreshadowing of a secret announcement. There's a question from Sendel. He writes, in our familiar paradigm, teachers orchestrate learning for groups of students. Tutors work with students one-on-one. So far, it seems like AI, and in fact, most ed tech tools, have been built for the one-on-one model. What opportunities are there for students to work together with AI support or guidance? And there were many other questions about collaborative learning, and I think, Sendel has nicely articulated what a lot of people are curious about.
Yeah, so I'll give a couple of I'll go from some low-hanging fruit, and then we can daydream a little bit about where this could go.
Yeah.
We are already working on ways that students can show more subjective work on Khan Academy, and then you can synthesize that for the teacher. So traditionally, Khan Academy kids would answer, let's call it machine gradable problems. Some of those are still, you type in an equation or type in a number, but you couldn't before ask a student to explain their reasoning or to show their work and then to synthesize that for the teacher. Within 6 months, we will have that type of thing where a teacher can get that level of insight from student work. So once again, that's the whole class. It's not just a one-on-one thing. You get the next level, we're thinking about ways that a teacher, teachers do things like exit tickets to understand where the class is, or do nows, or they want to poll the class. Historically, those have been multiple choice type things. Now we're building, and this is something that it's not launched yet, but it's going to be launched soon, where a teacher can poll the entire classroom. Hey, how do you think a plant gets its energy before we cover today's lesson? So the students can kind of say what their current conception is and what maybe it's a misconception, maybe it's not. And then the teacher can very quickly synthesize that. So those types of tools we think can be useful for the teacher when they're doing the whole class. And even the tools that already exist, which are going to be free to all teachers tomorrow, things like lesson planning, writing exit tickets, writing quizzes, et cetera, et cetera.
But if I could push you a little bit,
yeah.
What about the peers tutoring each other, or a group of 3 students solving a project problem together? How can we think about AI in that context?
Yes, and super excited. There's a chapter about that, about how using AI to facilitate human to human interaction. And so there's a couple of places that I see this happening in probably the next year, 18 months. In full disclosure, it does not exist on Conmigo yet, but it's coming very fast, and probably in other places. I don't know how many of y'all, OpenAI recently released a new model last week. They call it GPT-4 Omni. And once again, we had a little bit of a sneak peek, and they wanted me to run a demo with
Your son?
My son.
It's
Well,
kind
they
of
wanted
gone viral. So why don't you tell those who have not seen this video?
Yeah, so they said, hey, we want it to be with a student, and by the way, the student needs to sign a media release, and
yeah, we need parent consent.
We need parent. I'm like, okay, I'll bring my son. But there's 2 videos we made. One was, and I feel bad for my son, he's very low ego about it. He knows what a hypotenuse is, but it makes a much better demo when he doesn't know what a hypotenuse is. So you have to pretend like he didn't know but it was pretty convincingly tutoring him on a SOHCAHTOA type problem in trigonometry, a basic trigonometry question. But to your question, I think in some ways the more interesting demo is we just asked this new model. I was like, hey, I'm here with and it was seeing us. So it had access to a video stream of us. It had access to the camera.
Which is mind-blowing.
Which is mind-blowing.
It can sort of see you in more or less real time, right? And process the information.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's funny. This isn't in the demo, but my first thing is saying which one of us do you think is the father and which one is the son? And it was like, well, I don't want to offend anyone by making assumptions based on age, but I'm pretty sure that the person on the right is the son. I was like, how dare you? How old do I look? But anyway, but I asked it. That wasn't on camera. But then on camera, I did ask it, hey, I'm here with my son. I'd like you to facilitate a conversation between us that gets us to know each other better. And it did it. It did it brilliantly. It said, and that was literally, it wasn't like we did 20 takes, and it's not like we planned what we were going to say. It said, oh, okay, so Imran, tell me something about your dad that you really appreciate. And my son was like, oh, well, sometimes I know I do things that he's not the biggest fan of, but he's pretty good about not forcing me to stop, and he tries to convince me. I'd never heard my son tell me that ever.
Right.
I was like, wow, I was tearing up, and then it was like, well, what do you, oh, well, and it was saying, well, that's really great. And so Dad, how do you feel about your son? I'm like, first of all, I didn't know that. And then I'm like, what I really appreciated him is that even though he's 15, a lot of 15-year-olds are too cool for school. He kind of gets along with anyone. He can hang out with a 3-year-old, he can hang out with a 30-year-old. And he's not like, oh, why am I hanging out with a 3-year-old? And I really appreciate that about my son. And it was like, oh, great. And my son, I could tell it, even on the drive back from the OpenAI office, he's like, oh, I didn't realize that, you saw that. I was like, we had a moment.
You had a moment. I think that is, yeah. Go ahead.
I was saying I would do this every day. Probably in the next year, our Alexa and Siri devices are going to be able to do this.
They're working on it too.
Everyone's working on it.
Yeah.
But it's important for all of us to know how we can use it constructively, how we can use it for real. So that's kind of a human family thing. But to your question, I see it either through text or through conversation, potentially through a camera, although we have to be careful about privacy and the weirdness of it all.
And everything. Yep.
And all of that. But I could see it. A teacher says, hey, let's get into our breakouts. It facilitates the breakout sessions, or it while also reporting back to the teacher how the different breakout sessions are going. It facilitates icebreakers between students. It facilitates, so you can, the opportunities are pretty. There's another nonprofit that I helped start called schoolhouse.world, which is all about peer-to-peer tutoring. live between people over Zoom. And we're on a new project called Dialogues. We got a lot of feedback from colleges. They would love students to be able to have respectful conversations about hard topics. We can imagine the hard topics: abortion, Israel, Palestine, gun control. People are afraid of having conversations, or when they do, they oftentimes turn into, not people not listening to each other.
Yeah, not a
Um,
dialogue.
so we've already been running pilots on this, and we've been setting a context, and they've actually been surprisingly positive. We actually pair people who disagree on an issue, but then we give them a context, and colleges are really interested in kids who go through this type of thing. But we are also starting to have experiments similar to what the AI did for my son and I last, couple of weeks ago. Well, what if it can moderate a conversation between two people, a hard conversation, two kids in a class who are disagreeing with each other? Hey, okay, maybe there's a better way that you could frame that. I could see how someone could get a little triggered if you say it that way. How would you want to reframe that? Or do you really mean that thing that you just said? Which is pretty darn powerful. So, you can imagine simple things over text, icebreakers, all the way to pretty deep engagements, but we got to put the right guardrails and think about it the right way.
Okay, there is clearly a note of optimism. I think this is not just for generative AI. It's very Sal Khan. That's your vibe. I think I share that vibe. But there are lots of educators who are thinking about the dark and downside of generative AI. And one of the questions that has been raised is very related to what you just said. It's like, oh my gosh, it can facilitate peer-to-peer tutoring. It can also synthesize the feedback. And by the way, will generative AI replace teachers? And I know you're going to say, no, it won't. But I want you to grapple with that question as seriously as possible, because as you just wrote about, we really don't know what this technology will do in the future. And but only thing we can know is that we have the worst version now, and it's only going to get better, right? So will you speak to that question, Sal? And I have a couple of other sort of like wary questions that I'd like to vocalize on behalf of your audience.
Yeah, and we have the worst version of the underlying technology. The underlying technology is only going to get more advanced, which is going to empower bad use cases and really scary ones, and it's going to empower, I believe, good use cases as well. But one of the benefits, writing a book, I wanted to frame my own thinking about this because things are moving so fast. Like, what do I truly believe here? And even before generative AI, people used to ask, hey, is Khan Academy, because look, historically lectures were a thing. You're doing videos. Does that replace a teacher? Now you can get interactive extras. Does that replace a teacher? And I've always said, absolutely not. Like, if you imagine the spectrum of what you can do in a learning environment, and let's say imagine at this end of the spectrum is like the most basic, like a passive lecture or like some kind of like rote drill and kill something. And over here is like the most open-ended, we're going on a field trip. We are doing internships. I'm mentoring you. We're doing games, simulations, Socratic dialogue. That's at this end of the spectrum. The reality is before tools, a lot of students were having trouble with the basics. And so classes had to gravitate to the basics. But if we have tools that that can start to do some of this stuff, or at least make it a little bit more efficient or more productive, and includes some of the basics for teachers, like writing quizzes or, et cetera. It's not like there's nothing left to do. In fact, there's all of this stuff left to do. And I've always said, if I had to pick between amazing teacher and no technology, or amazing technology and no teacher, for myself, for my own kids, and by extension, anyone's kids, I would pick amazing teacher, no technology every time. Now, let's imagine AI gets better than any of us expect. 5-10 years in the future, it's almost
Three-dimensional
indiscernible.
avatars. It sounds
Yeah,
like
maybe I could put
Sal.
on a
It
Vision
looks
Pro
like
and it
Sal.
feels like
Yeah.
someone's. I still am 110% convinced that teaching is one of the safest professions out there, because teaching is going to index on the human element of it, that connection, that physical connection that you have in a room. The lesson I've learned from Khan Academy over the last 20 years is, yes, you can make a great technology. And yes, there are some kids, it's a small minority of kids, that you can give them that technology and they're off to the races with it. And even those kids end up having a very unbalanced education if they do that. for the most part, most kids need actors, usually adult actors, usually parents and teachers in their life, to make sure that they're engaging in what is good for them, to make sure they have the context of that engagement, and to provide motivators. And that can be intrinsic motivators, why this is cool, et cetera, et cetera. It can be extrinsic motivators. You better do this, otherwise you're going to fail this class. And I don't want to put light on that. Like that really drives a lot of students to engage in their learning, and otherwise they won't get there. So in this world of AI, I actually have trouble imagining, no matter how cool these tools get, you need a physical schools, ideally have a physical school setting. And, I started actually now a series of physical schools. So I'm clearly a big believer. And these are physical schools with like a 4-to-1 student teacher ratio. These are not, these aren't like schools that are somehow leveraging technology.
Yeah, they're not like kids in front of monitors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
These are schools that are using technology probably in very intelligent ways, I'd like to believe, but we have more human contact, not less. And we have more contact amongst peers, not less. So I think what we're doing at places like Khan Lab School and Khan World School is actually the future, which is, I imagine a world where we free up more resources so we can put more resources behind the teachers in the room. I'll give one last example. New York City, and it's a little bit of extreme because they spend a good amount on education. $40,000 per student per year.
What?
The average American, 40,000.
I didn't know that. Holy
$40,000 US. But their average class size is a little bit better than average. It's 25-to-1, but that means $1 million per class of 25 students. Where is that going? It's not every teacher here knows it's not going to the teacher. It's not going to the teacher. No matter
not going to school supplies either.
Not going to school supplies. No matter how good the pension is and the benefits.
Nope.
It's not going to the teacher. At least 80% of that is going someplace else. Now, when you really double click on it, I don't want to make it sound like 80% is just being wasted. There's other supports. There need to be special programs. You need facilities, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of it is going to layers of back office, administration type of stuff. I would say at least half of it is going to that kind of thing. And imagine a world where that stuff got more. So, like the registrar's office. Yeah, I think AI might be able to streamline some of that stuff, including in higher education. But to me, I would never advocate that, like, okay, let's spend less on education. I would say, no, let's get better teacher-student ratios than we had before. Why don't we get closer to what Khan Lab School is doing, as opposed to somehow turning it into a, the computers doing
some like factory model.
And so I think I would say the same example with nurse. A lot of people talking about AI in healthcare. I think nursing, that human connection, that human touch, once again, I think it's going to be one of the safest professions. One way to protect yourself in an AI world is to have a role where that human touch, that human connection matters.
Fun fact, the human like cognitive apparatus, like we are not just disembodied, right? Like, for example, human beings get a lot of information even from smell. And so far, none of the technologists have figured out how to, get technology to hug you or to, even below conscious awareness, like send signals through chemicals in the air. Anyway, that is another conversation. But there's a persistent theme, and I don't know how New York City public schools, like, you can update me on like what their AI policy is, but their first reaction to this next generation of AI was to ban it. And of course, cheating. Right. So I want you to address cheating, but I don't want you to address it merely in the abstract. I want you to get really concrete, because there are a lot of educators who want to know, like, right now, what should I do as an educator vis-a-vis this looming, threat of students using, these tools to, say that they did an essay that they didn't say, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah. And there is a whole chapter in the book on cheating. And I always like to start on first principles. I'm like, okay, before this AI even happened, what's the state of cheating? And it's pretty rampant. Well before
incredibly rampant. It's terrifying.
Especially, I know you're at a university, especially in higher education.
Especially in higher education.
Especially in higher education. But even I would say as soon as kids have the sophistication, probably middle school, high school, to start, going off script and using tools out there. I mentioned there's for things like essay writing, there are services. I don't want to make an ad for any of them, but you could do a quick Google search. They're happy to write your essay. These are humans, primarily in places like Nigeria, where you have these PhDs who can write really well. They'll write your essay for you for $5 a page. And so this or your fraternity brother, or your older sister has an old essay that it's not on the public or whatever. So that already existed. So to some degree, ChatGPT just put a spotlight on an issue that always was there, to some degree leveled the playing field a little bit for the cheating, which we don't want to. But if people are going to cheat, I guess equal opportunity for a poor kid and a rich kid to have equal odds of being able to cheat. But
Yeah.
the way so I'll give two answers. What I would do if I was an educator today, and then what I would do if I'm an educator, let's call it in by back to school or shortly thereafter.
Good.
So today, well, it depends. There's two modalities that you already have at your disposal. There's the one where you start doing more in-class writing, which I think is always good. I'm often associated with the flipped classroom, even though that wasn't my idea. But people used to say, "Hey, you've given a pretty good lesson on photosynthesis. I shouldn't use my class time for the lecture anymore. I should use class time for the problem solving," and that's cool because problem solving is where actually kids need more support. So similarly, if I was any type of teacher, humanities teacher, writing teacher, actually even a science teacher, I'm saying, hey, design a lab, do it right now. Like you can get the other resources at your own time and pace. You can watch a lecture at your own time and pace. But while we're in the classroom, I want you to write right now. And I'm going to walk around, or I'm going to put y'all into pairs and y'all going to write together, or you're going to give each other feedback. So that's what, it'll be more of like a real writer's workshop. So I think that's one solution. And then you have the
So
other.
basically, it's like you are making a chamber in which they're not able to use these things, and like they're
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. That's
Exactly.
one
And
strategy.
there's
Okay.
ways you can hybridize it a little bit. You could say like, you have to do a lot in class and you capture that and then you keep going. And if it's dramatically different, then you also know that something has
happened.
has happened. So, have writing samples from class is the solution. Do some writing in class. Now you have the other extreme that I write about, and I think this is more for high school and college students, is there's certain things where it really isn't about the writing. It's more about the fact collecting, doing the research, going and interviewing people, collecting data, or starting something in the world. And you say, okay, before I used to ask you to write a business plan. Now I'm going to ask you to start the business. Use whatever tools you want. But just be open with it. Tell me what tools you want. And that's a life skill. You should know how to use these AI tools to
Like if
become
you're
more
going to use
predictive.
AI to write your cover letter, do it and tell
Do it.
me. But
And
like,
tell
yeah. I am
exactly.
definitely on your side because like people who are like, oh, students shouldn't use AI to, revise their resume or their cover letter. I'm like, I'm telling my daughters to do it.
Oh,
Like,
100%.
why
100%.
wouldn't you use AI to write a more succinct and persuasive cover letter?
And they should also create a version. They should prompt the AI so that people can talk to their resume, but that's a whole other conversation.
That might be waiting.
I think it's going to be involved in matchmaking and other things too. But anyway, that's a whole other thing. Your AIs are going to go on a date and tell you if it was good. You should meet in real. But anyway, but then the middle ground that I'm going to now talk about, which is what we're working on pretty intensely at Khan Academy. We already have the early versions of this. It's already available, but we're going to, in the coming months, we're going to have this whole workflow where a teacher is going to work with the AI a teacher can already work with the AI to develop the assignment and the rubric. We already have that, but then they're going to assign it through the AI. And so we already actually have the part where the AI works with the student, acts as a writing coach. So, hey, let's come up with a thesis. Once again, AI is not doing it for the student, but acting as an ethical coach. Let's do some outlining, and we have a tool there. And then, the AI can highlight parts of the passage, give feedback. Hey, I tightened this up. Or can you really make that claim? Where's your data? Or is this really a good source? But once again, letting the student do the heavy lifting. And then when the student feels good about it, they submit. And now what the teacher is going to get, and I'm not talking about something in the far distant future. This is going, like we are building this. The teacher isn't just going to get the final output, and God knows where that came from. Even before AI, God knows where that came from. It, could have come from one of these internet providers or, something else. But now the teacher is going to get the final output, but also the process. So the AI is going to say, hey, here's the final output. And by the way, based on the rubric, I'd preliminary rate the rubric here, but you're the teacher, you're in charge. But by the way, I'm confident, the AI, am confident this was Angela's work. We spent 4.5 hours on it. If you want, here's the whole transcript. Here's my summary of the transcript. I can answer any questions you, the teacher, have about Angela's work. This is consistent with the work that she has been doing in class. I'm very confident this is Angela. If you were to go to ChatGPT, copy and paste, or go to one of these essay farms on the internet, the AI is going to tell the teacher, hey, I don't know where this came from. It just showed up. It's very inconsistent with Angela's other writing. So what you're having here is, I think the AI, not only will it undermine not just AI cheating, but all the cheating that a lot of the cheating that was happening before, but now actually give teachers more insights into what is going on. And you can imagine if you're a teacher grading 180 essays over a weekend, which I have met a teacher who literally was grading 180
Thank
essays from
God I was a
seventh
math
grade.
teacher. I did not have to do that, but God bless the souls of all the language arts teachers there are.
And teachers are doing heroic things like really giving good feedback, but that is hard. Like, if you told me that all I had to do for the next week is grade 180 papers on like The Great Gatsby from seventh graders, I'd be like, nope.
Yeah, it's
I'm not going to do that. That's too much for me. And that's only one sliver of the many things that an English teacher might have to do. So, but to actually give insights, hey, it turns out that about 30% of your kids are really had difficulty finding a thesis statement. And now when we plan our next lesson, let's keep that in mind, and we can create a special activity for those kids on thesis statements, whatever. That we think can only help teachers as well.
Did you use AI to write this book? And tell me how you did, if you did.
I not in any really meaty way. The only place where we really used it is when I wrote the proposal
Mhm.
to potential publishers. I definitely said, okay, what are all of the possible dimensions? Like, I literally wrote, like, if you're Sal Khan, and what are all of the different questions that people would have about AI and education? And so that helped me. I mean, I didn't just take that and use it, but it helped me think, oh yeah, we should have a chapter about cheating. Oh yeah, we should have a chapter about college admissions. We should have a chapter about student safety. We should have a chapter about, how this is going to affect work. So it helped me be more
Like
comprehensive in
map
what
the
I'm doing.
space, but you
Yeah.
didn't use it to like write individual sentences or
No,
rewrite
no, no.
individual
I did
sentences.
use it. I
Interesting.
did use it though also to come up with pithier names for
Oh,
chapters.
is this an AI generated title?
No. Richard Pine, who's my book agent, came up
Who
with
is
that
also my book agent, as you
oh yeah,
know.
yeah, oh, I
Yeah,
forgot that.
yeah, yeah.
So I
This
was
is
talking to him
Richard's title.
and I was like, this is a brave new world we're getting into, he's like, well, we should name the book Brave New Words. And I'm like,
I love
that's
this title. It's a great. Let me ask
yeah.
you this. I know Lonnie's going to appear and she's going to probably ask the last question, but I did want to ask you this. When GPS, right? Like, like your car tells you where you're supposed to go, right? Turn left here, go 100 feet. Now you're supposed to turn right. When that magical invention blessed this planet, people like me finally had a prayer of getting where they needed to go. But the worry is, and actually has been substantiated by scientific research, that any kind of extended use of GPS does diminish whatever directional sense you had. Now, some people might say, who cares? Because I'll never be without GPS. That's how I feel. But others are worried. And by extension, I think there's this question, will AI make us stupid? I think you've argued that it can make us smart, but can you address that question? It's like existential, I think.
Oh yeah, and I mean, just on the GPS, I'm actually the other extreme of you. I don't I if I need directions, I'll look at it and I try to remember it and I put it away
Whoa,
for the
okay.
exact reason. I pride myself on that. Like
You're like, I
I
think we
look
need to
at
go
it.
northeast.
Yeah, I do find that it keeps me and I get to know cities better. Otherwise, I go blindly and I'm like, what was I doing
Yeah,
there? But
otherwise you're like me.
now I have a mental map. But to your point, look, I think it can make us we can get dependent on it and it can make us less capable, or it can act as, it can push our muscles, our mental muscles, especially to make us better. And I think you're going to, the bottom line, and this is maybe the crux of it all, is it's easy. A lot of folks are talking about all the ways that AI is going to go bad. And unfortunately, I think they're going to be right in a lot of cases. Now, we know all technology is an amplification of human intent. We know the bad actors are going to use AI for bad reasons, for the fraud, for the, deep fakes. We know the lazy actors, some of which are kids, are going to use AI for lazy intent. So they're going to shortcut, hey, write my, this or that. So the question is, do the rest of us who have positive intent, who want to exercise kids' brains, who want to develop them, who want to develop everyone, who want to form human connection, do we just wring our hands and say, no, this thing's going to be bad news, I don't want anything to do with it? Well, what's going to happen? The lazy and the bad actors are going to win. Or do we say, no, let's take proactive measures to amplify the things that we care about, which are students learning, students being connected with each other, us being able to personalize education better for students, us giving back teachers time so they have more time and energy for themselves. So, we don't have record high attrition anymore, and energy for their students. And so that's what this book is about. This isn't a flip of a coin. Everyone here, no matter how afraid you are, no matter how skeptical you are, taking yourself out of the debate and just walking away, I think is the irresponsible thing to do. I think if you have positive intent, you have to get into the debate.
Right. Angela Duckworth, we love you. Thank you
Hi,
so
Lonnie.
much
I love you.
for your engagement with Fan. Thank you. Always, you're so prepared and so ready, and we just adore you. Sal, obviously with let's see how many 47 questions posed during the event and 50 plus before the event. I want to tell these folks, Sal is going to spend another hour or 55 minutes, technically 8:05 to 9 p.m. Central, answering all of your questions posed by you, yourself, and you in after hours. Come to after hours, make a meaningful donation to Fan. We leave that definition of meaningful up to you. Make a meaningful donation to Fan. We'll send you the after hours link. Come hang out. Come ask this very sharp man who could not be more on the leading edge of, just about everything. Come ask him questions. He will perhaps allay some of your fears. Perhaps he'll stoke some of your fears. We'll find out which way that goes. I'm voting with allay. We have 1 minute, and actually, Angela, let's see if you guys can maybe share this question, because it is a shared question directed to the two of you from Ross. If we consider AI a super tutor, teacher, or educational tool, can it hinder our ability to develop grit?
Huh. Sal, do you want me to go first?
Yes,
You
I
can
do.
go first. Yeah.
I will say this. You know what grit is? Grit is having passion and perseverance for a long-term goal. It doesn't say you can't use generative AI to get to that goal. It doesn't say you can't use your awesome 8th grade English teacher to get to that goal. It doesn't say you can't ask your coach at track practice for advice on how to get to that goal. A lot of times people think of grit as like doing things the hard way. The book that I'm writing is called Easier. And I think part of an easier way to achieve your goals includes next generation AI.
Oh, look at that big old Easter egg you left for us, right?
Yeah, well, I haven't
The
written the
title
book
of
yet.
the
I'm working
forthcoming
on it.
book.
That's the title, though. Do you like it? I don't know.
I do.
Just
I
trying
can't
it out.
wait. Well, gosh, and now that time has run out. That was unfair, slightly unfair, Ms. Duckworth.
Ask Sal at the beginning of this a little cocktail hour.
All right, so Sal, we're out of time. We're at 8:01. We'll hear your answer about grit in after hours. How's that, to be fair?
Sounds good.
Angela go as well. I told her 8 o'clock, and here I'm already a liar by 1 minute.
No problem.
Thank you
I'll
both
go.
so much. Hope to see a whole bunch of people's faces at after hours. Sal, just great. Thanks everybody for joining us. Come hang out tomorrow night. Gonna be a great program tomorrow night. Thanks everybody. Good night.